Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us here on Sunday afternoon. It is going to be for your benefit, so we've got some really good research studies for you to listen to today and some very fine presenters. We would really like you to ask your questions. You'll see the question and answer part at the bottom of your screen. Please write your questions and answers there, and we will answer them at the end of each presentation. And I'm pretty sure it is being recorded, so this will be available for you at a later date. So this is just another way ACMA is trying to help our members, and this part of it is to actually help our researchers and encourage them to do the good work, which then lays the foundation for our medicine and our clinical practice. So I'm really excited to welcome all of you and thank you for coming. Our first presenter will be Daniel Spiegelman. Daniel's been practicing in Sydney, but he's practiced and presented all around the world. I will only do a tiny introduction, and I'll leave it up to all of our presenters to fill you in properly on their research and themselves a little bit. Thank you, Daniel.
Thanks, Waveney. I want to say thanks to Waveney and Mia and everyone else for putting this together and helping get some research out there and provide the means for people to let everyone know what they're researching. Putting all my cards on the table, I've really just only started my master's on the遵生八箋, or the translated as the 8 Commentaries on observing the precepts of life. So this is really what I'm going to do today, is a preliminary kind of overview on the book, how it's structured, some of its influences and that kind of thing. What drew me to this book, it's a very unique book from the Ming dynasty, but because at the time of the Ming dynasty, there was all this new printing kind of technology. It allowed people to have access to books in a way they didn't in the past. So really it's a compilation of this whole history of Chinese Yangsheng culture, or a curation of Yangsheng culture, which is the nourishing life culture. And there are commentaries from the author, but it also uses books thousands of years before the writing and publication of this book. So I thought it was a really interesting piece. And also it uses a lot of Dalian or physical exercises using Chinese medical theories, which is something that I feel a lot of these texts haven't got much publication or translation in the West. So, and me personally, my personal stories, I used a lot of these exercises to heal myself. I mean, these days it's called Qigong. Dalian there's a lot of overlap in the terminology. I'm not going to get into the terminology now, but there is a lot of overlap between these kinds of exercises. But I used it to heal my own shoulder injuries, which were chronic and quite severe. So I had a real interest in these sorts of exercises. So we'll get into what it is. The遵生八箋, it was compiled in 1590 and published in 1591 by a Ming dynasty scholar called Dalian. We'll get into who he was in a second, but there are eight of these books, and they're all sort of tied together by this theme of Yangsheng, or nourishing life. And that's something that includes therapeutic exercises, like I mentioned before, the Dalian, but also how to eat, various lifestyle advices, what herbal formulas to take at certain times of years. Seasons is very big in this book and in Yangsheng culture in general, and that's the focus of my research. And what's interesting is the addition by this guy, really, of leisurely pursuits, such as using things like tea drinking, calligraphy, this kind of thing, which is sort of the pursuits of the elite at the time, which is something which is a bit of an addition this book makes into Yangsheng culture, and it's what this book is most known for. We'll get into it a little bit later, but you can see with the chapters of the eight different books tied together, we have The first chapter, the commentary on profound theories of leading a simple life. That's really just a look back on a whole bunch of different philosophical texts, Yangshan texts, and advice on lifestyle advice. The second chapter is the one I'm focused on, which is to do with seasonal lifestyle advice. And there's a lot of overlap between all these chapters. This one, the commentary on peace and happiness in daily life, is what I mentioned before, these sort of elite pursuits. And so is this, the fifth chapter, the commentary on quiet appreciation of leisurely activities. So things like, tea drinking. I think it gets into cultivation of these little dwarf trees and all these kinds of things. The fourth chapter, the commentary on extending life and driving back disease. Again, this overlap between, that's a lot of Dalian, Yangshan advice, and overlap between the chapter I'll be focused on, the seasonal one. There's a chapter on food. There's a chapter on sort of alchemical medicines. And then this last chapter, the commentary on traveling far outside this world of dust being the mundane world. So it kind of, this in the first chapter kind of contextualize it in wider sort of Taoist pursuits. And there's a lot of the stories of Taoist hagiographies, which is like stories of Taoist saints and immortals going on in this last chapter. And I mentioned before, but there's so many texts mentioned in this book. It's exhausting trying to pin them all down. And I've said I've just started my research, so I really haven't pinned them all down yet. But his library was immense. It's really quite clear his library was immense, and he was a very well-read person, Dalian. And there were 3 editions of this work, which highlights that it was quite a popular work. And there are 2 prefaces of this work. This one by Toulon. Toulon was under the patronage of the Gao family, so he was a kind of culturally elite figure of the time, and he kind of added some cultural prestige to the work. And another by this Taoist priest, Li Shiying. Li Shiying, he talks about having this prophetic series of dreams and instructions from, all these Taoist deities, which led him to meet Dalian. And he's there to emphasize the sort of wider cosmic and the Taoist significance of the work. So I think it's interesting that he chose these 2 figures to preface the work, because it really ties in what the work is kind of about, this cultural elite dimension, and then this sort of Taoist cosmological dimension going on throughout these 8 books. And Dalian, he had these other 2 names, Shenfu or Reinandaren, which kind of means the lucky southern Taoist, or the auspicious southern Taoist. And he came from a wealthy merchant family who sold grain to the States in Hangzhou. So you can see he had a lot of money and time to pursue his reading and these sorts of leisurely pursuits, which he writes about it. Hangzhou itself was, the West Lake pictured here where he lived was a tourist destination, but also, nearby there were figures such as Taoist figures such as Ge Hong, who kind of had lived and practiced, much before this time. So there was a lot going on, and it was a big center of commerce and trading, and it's just outside Shanghai, so it still remains like that this day, this area. Dalian suffered from a number of health issues, which he treated himself. He had bad health earlier in life, and also he eye issues, which he claims to have treated using a variety of Yangshan techniques. And as mentioned before, he had a very strong interest in material culture. He was a collector of artworks, and he himself was a dramatist and poet. He wrote a book called the Record of Fidelity and Piety and the Jade Hairpin, which is about a romantic drama about an impoverished scholar's tryst with a Taoist nun. And I've got some quotes, but I'll move through quickly because I don't have so much time. He talks about his health problems, and I'll get into the kind of layout of the book, because this is the commentary of Building Health According to the Four Seasons, which really interested me, this book, because I think it's fairly unique kind of setup, and it interests me in the way that, I think this is a real foundational part of Chinese medicine that gets put to the side a little bit, and we'll talk about it a little bit. It's not just the seasonal elements that are interesting to me, but the agricultural sort of developments that which I believe led to the importance placed on these seasonal divisions. And China, looking back for such a long time, was a feudal culture, which placed enormous emphasis on agriculture. And these days we're not just sheltered from the seasons, which gets a lot of mention in the Chinese medicine world. But I think a little bit the fact that we're so far away from agriculture in our modern society doesn't get as much mention. The fact that we get our food from woolies, and we're really not aware of the cycles of growth and decay and all this sort of stuff that goes on with when you really live on a farm and observe an agricultural society. And this I think doesn't get so much emphasis. This quote is from the preface, or like one of the first lines of the chapter is Gaozi. So he calls himself Gaozi, which is I think a bit of a tongue-in-cheek reference to how the classics are laid out. Like they will always have Huangdi Re. He calls them like the Yellow Emperor states. He often says Gaozi states, which is, I think, a little tongue-in-cheek reference to this. He says, Gaozi states the meaning of time is expansive. Under heaven, nothing is accomplished outside of the scope of time. Thus, when sages were unified with the order of the four seasons and the book Yearling, thus the sages were unified with the order of the four seasons, and the book Yearling is particularly indispensable to all practitioners of longevity. So I'm going to look a little bit at about what this Yearling is. It's a very important book, and it has enormous influence throughout Chinese history. It comes from the Li Ji, or the Book of Rites. We don't exactly know when it was authored. It came out in the Han Dynasty, but a lot of the texts were pre-Han, and it's very difficult to work out its exact dating, but it's focused on the undertaking of appropriate rituals and governance according to the seasons, and actually according to each month, so 12 months. And this spawned a whole series of texts imitating this structure. This idea of these seasonal edicts started with which were later called the Yearling, started with the Shangshu. And the structure of these 12 seasons first came about in this Xiaoshaozhong, the small calendar of the Xia dynasty, which is it is actually the earliest calendar in China to have circulation, and it could possibly, and there's arguments about it, but it could possibly stretch back to 2000 BCE. The actual calendar itself, that people are determining that astrologically, but it's really not known how old it is. But I just mention it to give an indication of how far this sort of structure goes back. And there are similar kind of structures found in the sort of the contemporaneous Shu manuscripts, the Huainanzi, and this Liu Shi Chunxiu, the Mr. Liu's Spring and Autumn Annals. And the small calendar of the Xia is it's very much focused on agriculture, but these later texts are very much focused on court rituals, governance, this kind of thing. And there is some mention of health, disease, this kind of thing, often in terms of epidemic disease and this kind of thing, but it's really not the focus of these texts. And out of all of them, the Yearling was by far the most influential one of them. I've just listed here, these are a number of agricultural texts that use this structure that come after the Yearling, and this one, the festivals and seasonal customs of the Jinshu region and this Yuju Dalian are also found. They're quoted in the Zhongxin Baji and the text I'm looking at. And then there are all these Yangsheng texts, the nourishing life texts, which also start to adopt this structure. What's interesting to note is the agricultural structure comes earlier, and I think, and I've stopped dating them at around the Tang and Song dynasty, but they keep going. They keep going up into the Qing dynasty. This structure remains very much intact. The Yangsheng texts, I think, start a little bit later adopting this structure. There are some earlier ones which make mention of it, but don't really delve into it so deeply. And I'd like to make mention of this, the Dalian Tool, which is from, these are a bunch of texts which were excavated from Mawangdui. They were buried around, 168 BCE from a local lord, and there's all kinds of, these predate the Huangdi Neijing, and the medical texts there predate the Huangdi Neijing and these kinds of things. But the reason I mention it is there's a Chinese academic called Shen Shou. It was brought to my light by Dolly Young, who has done a lot of work on Dao Yin, and I've got a podcast. I interviewed her for my podcast. She did a fantastic PhD thesis, but this work came to my light through her PhD thesis. But the fact that we have 44 figures here, and there's this Chinese academic Shen Shou who makes we have no idea of knowing if this is correct or not, but he makes the case that these 4 rows represent the 4 seasons, and the 11 columns represent the 11 acupuncture channels which were discussed in the Mawangdui. So in the Mawangdui, where pre-Huangdi Neijing, there's not yet 12 acupuncture channels, there's only 11. So this could be the first documentation of a seasonal kind of exercise regime like is found later in the Zhongxin Bajian. Oh yeah, and then we have these seasonal texts which come later. So again, I've mentioned a few. The ones I've mentioned at the bottom here, actually, they all are quoted in the Zhongxin Bajian, but these don't lay out monthly sort of dictates, but they sort of say, oh, for the 3 months of spring, do this, for the 3 months of summer, do this. Huangdi Neijing, especially the second chapter of the Su Wen, really delves into this a lot, but it's all throughout the Huangdi Neijing and this Yin Shu as well, the Book of Pulling. So we'll get into, the structure of this, the commentary on building health according to the 4 seasons. So each chapter starts with these general seasonal recommendations. So throughout all of summer, do this, or throughout all of the 3 months of summer or the 3 months of spring, do this. We have, like on this diagram on the left here, this is like this Wuxing, the 5-phase diagram of, which phase this is all related to summer. I've done it related to summer because in Australia we're in summer now, so I thought that would be the most interesting one to look at. But yeah, we have, the heart and, basically going all around here, the different 5-phase correspondences with the fire phase or the fire element. And on the right here, we have this Xinshen Tool. This is the Xinshen Tool, but for each season we have, I found this really interesting, but we have the visual depiction of the spirit of the season. And these, we have the green dragon to spring and all of this, and they have astrological precedents going back thousands of years to the Shang dynasty, these figures, and they're still being used here. And what's really interesting here is it's called Danyuan. When I lived in Wudang for a year, and I learned a bunch of Taoist meditative techniques there while I was living there. And yes, Danyuan was, we did meditations calling these sorts of spirits. So they were still in, it's still in use in modern day China, these kinds of practices and these kinds of names. So after, and in each of these seasonal chapters, we're given health advice, how to behave appropriately. Each organ is broken down to the sorts of pathologies that can develop with the organ. We're given a number of different Dalian sort of exercises, how to deal with it, different formulas, herbal formulas on how to use at this time. After this, we start to follow a yearling structure, so a monthly structure. So after a general structure, we go into, the 4th month, the 5th month, the 6th month of spring, and we're given similar sort of advice, how to practice taboos, things to do, things not to do in each particular month, what to eat, what not to eat in each particular month. This kind of thing. And then we get into the Jieqi. So right at the end of the, after say month 4, we get into the Jieqi, and the Jieqi are in this are only aligned to a specific Dalian exercise, which we'll get into later. But the Jieqi are basically, they're called seasonal nodes or solar nodes. They're fortnightly divisions of the year. I've written them all down here. You can see they basically are named after seasonal and agricultural movements that are happening in the northern plains, specific to the northern plains of China. And obviously we're in the southern hemisphere, so they're flipped. At the moment, we are in Lixia, the start of summer. And yeah, I won't get into it too much in interests of time, but yeah, these are the exercises that appear at the end of each month. So there are 2 of these. This is yeah. So it's said that this Taoist saint called Chen Tuan started these exercises. They don't really appear till the Ming dynasty in this book, the Baosheng Xinjian, and it's in a few other books I've mentioned there, which sort of indicates that it was quite a popular exercise. The language, I will say, whether it's mimicking or mimicking earlier texts, or it actually has an earlier origin. There's similar texts from the Sui and the Tang dynasty 1,000 years before. The language and the exercises, I will say, are very similar. And they're all seated, so they have a kind of meditative quality, like these, they're called the seated exercises. So they're all like this, these sort of stretching exercises while they're seated. And I've included a translation of, this is the exercise for right now. So what we should be doing right now. So it's the Yin Mao times, waking up between 3 and 7. And it's this is a breathing exercises. A lot of them involve holding your breath, which is, and clacking of the teeth and swallowing fluids. And yeah, this stretches back a long time, these kinds of exercises. I will say there are diagrams, but when you have the written, if you're going on the written language alone, it isn't 100% clear often what's going on. It takes a bit of thought to work it out. And I will also just want to finish by saying there are some idiosyncrasies. I talked about the general structural layout between each chapter, but there are some idiosyncrasies in each chapter. For example, in the summer texts, we have all these Taoist talismans, which appear, and they're often related to this Wenyi, or sort of pestilence or plague, hot pestilence or warm diseases. There's a number of these in the summer chapter. Dalian mentions before that he doesn't really think, he doesn't comment on them, he just puts them in there sort of to preserve them, but he doesn't really regard them very highly, these kinds of, he personally doesn't regard them highly, these talismans and that kind of thing. So in order to leave time for a few questions, I'll wrap up there. And this is my institute. I have a podcast, and I'm working on this at the moment. So I'm going to be putting out more information on this, more information on Dalian exercises, especially more seasonal information, this kind of thing. So if you're interested, you can follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, look at our website. And yeah, I'll leave 5 minutes for any questions that have happened. But yeah, thanks for listening. Let's have a look at what questions we have.
Thank you, Daniel. I'll read them so that
Thanks.
it'll make it easier for you. Manying is asking, can we get the slides? Yes, the slides will be available. The next one's from Omar Hashim, and it says, does the commentary of building health have suggestions for those living in countries which do not have 4 seasons, such as in the tropical weather where it would be always summer the whole year round in the tropics?
No, the answer is no, it does not. And this is something, I love this question. Thanks for asking it. It's something I think you can work it out if you live there, I think, but you need to be living there and spending time there, and the same theories can be used there. But really, whole of Chinese medicine developed in a place with 4 distinct seasons. Not everywhere has 4 distinct seasons. And yeah, to what degree the ancient Chinese knew about that, I think is debatable. Obviously, they spent time in these areas, but I don't know how much they, the theories developed there. So I think you certainly can start to use elements of these theories, but I would think you would have to live there in this sort of climate, really observe it and observe what's going on, understand where the Chinese are coming from with their 4 seasons, and start to apply elements of it to what's happening around you. Yeah.
The next one's from Sung Hee. Can the 4 seasons be applied in Australia because we're in the Southern Hemisphere? If it can, then how can we apply? And which one is better in terms of seasonal exercise and current modern exercise such as gym and jogging?
Okay, so there's a few questions there. With the 24 Jieqi which are worked out, basically we have the equinoxes and the solstices there, which are reversed in the Southern Hemisphere. So it's a good way to work out what's going on. And the seasons, they're just reversed seasonally here. So I don't think that's too difficult to work out. I would go from the solstices and the equinoxes and that kind of thing and work out. You can work out those 24 Jieqi from there. The differences, I think there are a lot of differences. A lot of these Dalian exercises, especially the earlier ones, there's similarities with yoga, and I think Sun Simiao, back in the Tang Dynasty, somebody calls them Indian, I think, actually. And I think he makes, don't quote me on that, he makes reference to them coming from India. So some of them are related to yoga, stretching, this kind of thing. There is overlap there. There's a lot of breathing exercises. There's a lot of holding of breath, this kind of thing, and gentle stretching. So it's not, I'm not saying, don't do jogging and this kind of thing, but it's different. It's different. There's a more meditative quality to a lot of them, and a lot more emphasis on breath work and stretching. Yeah, some are gentle, some are not as gentle. There's a lot of, So I don't know if that answers your question. There's no lifting weights or anything like that going on. And then the Chinese did lift weights, but I think that was more for military and martial kind of application rather than health application.
I think that modern exercise potentially doesn't necessarily nourish life.
Yeah.
Because people kind of attempt it at 150% rather than only about 75%, which uses up pretty much all of their chi and leaves them open to injury. So it's quite different. Modern exercise is just belting your body into submission, really, rather than nurturing it.
That I'd agree with. There are some good people out there who factor in aging and how you're feeling on the day and all of that stuff. But at a what is it called, the F45 F45 gyms that doesn't have it.
Owned by Adam Gilchrist.
Right.
And the last one, Vula has asked, can you give an example of where you have used this in a clinic setting and for a particular patient with a particular problem, please?
Oh, okay. Think. Well, listen, Does she mean seasonally or the exercises? Because I prescribe
Just anything in general.
Yeah, okay, so I prescribe exercises to my patients often. I'd like to. I'm thinking of a way to be able to get them to do them a little more, which is I'll post some stuff on YouTube. I want to have sort of patient resources up on YouTube, which hopefully other people will be welcome to use. And when I really work out these sorts of exercises, I'll put them up on YouTube and other people can use them according to seasons. I like to know that they're working rather than just going by the text. So I really want to, if I'm going to give it to a patient, I want to know it's working. So I'll often give them exercises I've practiced myself, standing meditation, this kind of thing. I've not really prescribed, yes, some not really prescribed from this text in particular, but I've looked at all the books and I've adopted exercises from them, which I think are good. Yeah, specific cases. Let's see. I've got there's a Dalian whole series I'm gonna upload to YouTube soon, and there's some. It's just for general immune building, but that obviously includes the lung and that kind of thing. So there are some exercises there which would be yeah.
There's a few more, Daniel.
Okay.
Is your research translating or interpreting this text?
Yes. So
yes. Which one?
We have a press run by my partner, so I will be translating and putting out a publication. We have a press. If you look on our website, we've translated a number of books, and this will be my first foray into the world of published translation.
So not interpreting, just translating.
Yeah, I'll translate. The interpretation will come in the masters and the translation.
Sure, thank you. Does the exercise involve any specific equipment?
No, it's not really. No.
Mm-hmm. And the last one is, any good suggestion for this season in strengthening the lung? And this season, especially seeing the last slide was mentioning about the Wenbing, prevent lung breathing and stamina.
Yes, I'm gonna again this
next stamina
YouTube
exercise.
Video, yeah, the next YouTube video I'm gonna upload is very much focused on lung, some exercises for the lung. And incorporates ideas from this, but it's various things I've learned and then various things I've read in books. I've put them kind of together in a Qigong or a Dalian set that's pretty accessible. Yeah.
Thank you, Daniel, very much. I really appreciate your input. And
pleasure. Thank you all.
Everyone's got the information here to check out your website, so keep us posted. It'll be interesting.
If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe.